Welcome to the Science for Sport podcast, where we dive into stories and insights that drive peak performance. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the science of success. Here's your host, Richard Graves.
Hello and welcome to the Science for Sport podcast with me, Richard Graves. On this week's show, we're looking at blood flow restriction training, or BFR. What is it? How is it applied? And how is it becoming more accessible to organisations in order for them to get the very best for their athletes? Well, joining me to discuss this issue is Dr. Warren Bradley, the Chief Science Officer and founder of Hytro, an organisation which deals specifically with BFR research and wearables. So, let's hear from him now.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Well, it's a very warm welcome back onto the podcast to Dr. Warren Bradley, the Chief Science Officer and founder of Hytro, which specialises in blood flow restriction training wearables. 2023, I think, Warren, was the last time you were on the podcast. So for those that haven't heard it and aren't familiar with your background, bring us up to speed with where we are today, please.
Sure. I'll try and keep this brief. So very quickly, my background, I spent a decade in professional sports. I worked in the Premier League, international rugby, and I was a sports scientist by trade. But simultaneously, I completed a PhD in exercise physiology. And I guess the intersect between those two led me to the creation of Hytro. So I'd used a lot of blood flow restriction training in facility for rehabs, so to regenerate muscle tissues, etc., with athletes. And because I was in the academic space as well, I looked into the literature and was quite blown away by the volume that existed and couldn't understand why it wasn't being used more robustly. So long story short, the tools were far too complex and cumbersome. I said, let's simplify this. I conceived of and patented a way to do that and then built the products over the next few years and launched in 2020. And now we serve over 260 professional teams around the world. Thousands of the best athletes, Ronaldo, LeBron, people like that use the product. So it's gone from stowing in my spare room to going to space, which we might go into shortly. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as well a little further down the line in this conversation. It is a remarkable story because 2020, as everyone is aware, the same year as the pandemic hit us. So to go from an idea in 2020 to where we are now, as you say, working with over 200 professional organisations around the world, are there times that you have to pinch yourself a little bit and think, wow, how did we get here so quickly?
Absolutely. I 100% have imposter syndrome as well, so that doesn't help. But I was at Cape Canaveral 7 weeks ago watching a launch of the rocket, SpaceX rocket, with my products aboard, and that was a very big pinch me moment for sure. And then meeting some of these athletes that we get to speak with and work with, is childhood dreams, to be honest, and it feels very normal at this point, which is crazy to say, but yeah, it's definitely pinch me moments most weeks for sure.
Now, anybody that's a sports enthusiast, an amateur sports person that just plays on the weekend for their local club, organisation, or aspiring to have a professional career, will hear names like Cristiano Ronaldo, LeBron James, Lionel Messi, and your ears automatically prick up. But I will confess, blood flow reduction training and wearables are something I know very little about. Before we'd initially had a conversation on the phone, hands up, full disclosure, I was quite naive. So every day is a school day. This is a conversation I'm looking forward to being educated by. So let's go back to the very beginning. What is it? How does it work? And what does it aim to achieve?
Sure. So blood flow restriction's actually been around for 60, 70 years at this stage. So it's not a new thing. It's been very difficult to apply because tools were very complex and used in a medical setting. But essentially what blood flow restriction does is, for those watching, or not watching, I'm doing some visual cues, but blood flows into the limbs, so the arms or the legs. And then we've applied a strapping mechanism to the top of the arms or the legs, so the return blood flow back to the body is restricted. So blood goes in, but blood is struggling to come out. And what happens is net pooling. So you get this swelling of the muscle tissue with blood. So that's quite stressful for the muscles. They're becoming swollen, right? At the same time, oxygen is stripped out of the tissues because it's used, and then the deoxygenated blood is stuck. So what we have right now is a tissue that's primed and stressed to then go and do some exercise. So if you move on top of a blood flow restriction stimulus, you're going to magnify the effectiveness of anything you do. So for example, if you were to do a body weight squat with blood flow restriction applied on the legs, your body would experience that like a heavy squat, like a 100-kilo barbell squat in terms of growing muscle and growing strength. But you're not. You're lifting body weight. So that's why it's incredible for rehab. But what we said was, well, the mechanisms are the same whether you're injured or not. So why can't we use that for healthy people? And that's exactly what we've done at Hytro. We have taken the principle of blood flow restriction, put it into a convenient and simple to apply garment, and unlocked it for everyone. So it's now not just medical and rehab. This is for anyone who wants to grow muscles quicker, get stronger quicker, build their engines and endurance capacity quicker, and importantly, recover quicker. That's one of the primary focuses we have as a business. All leveraged and mediated through restriction of blood flow, making things more challenging for the body.
At what point did did you have your light bulb moment, if you like, as somebody who works in sports science, thinking this can be applied to everyday athletes? Because I think I'm right in saying, from what background reading I've done, initially this method really was only used when it came to helping war veterans with injuries, for example, rehab and avoid muscle wastage, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess just cycling the story back to when I was working in professional sports, as I said, I was a sports scientist, but I sat across supporting strength and conditioning, physiotherapists, etc. And essentially I was privy to and helped with a lot of rehabs. So we'd have an injury, we may have a surgical intervention, the athlete was bedbound. And at that stage, you lose a lot of muscle tissue and strength very quickly. And the proportion of how much you lose in strength and size will dictate how long the rehab process is, or somewhat dictate how long the return to play is going to be. If you lose several inches off your thigh, you need to regenerate that before you're able to get proper movement qualities back and physical performance. So we use a lot of BFR for that purpose, to offset atrophy. And as I mentioned, because I was kind of stuck in the academic world as well at the time and publishing research in a related but different field, I was very curious, and I was thinking, well, how is this working mechanistically? And when I read the research and realized there was over 10,000 research papers at the time, 10 years ago, for the record, there's over 13,000 at this stage. When you realize that things like compression, massage, ice baths, contrast bathing, cryo, all of them combined in terms of the literature, there's a couple of hundred papers. With BFR, there's over 13,000. So there's this real big disconnect between how much BFR is being used and how much evidence there is that has built up over the years. So when I asked the question about why it wasn't being used, it was simply the tools. The tools were far too complex and cumbersome. They were very effective, but complex and cumbersome all the same. You had to supervise someone putting on the cuff in the correct, safe location. You had to supervise pumping up the pressure. And all of that meant it was a one-on-one supervised rehab device. So the light bulb moment was essentially saying, what if this could be used autonomously without practitioner supervision? And what does that look like? How do you build a product that doesn't require supervision? Well, you need to satisfy two safety parameters, crucially. They are, one, location of the BFR stimulus. So it has to be proximal, which basically means the top quarter portion of your limb. How do you do that without supervising a cuff? You build it into a garment. If you build it into the armpit or the groin of a garment, a short or a t-shirt, it's always in the top quarter portion of the limb. It's therefore always safe position. So we've safety tick number one. Number two is the pressure applied by the BFR stimulus itself. Typically, you would have a handheld sphygmometer, so a pump-up cuff that shows you the pressure going up, or you would have a digital readout from an expensive device that will tell you the pressure that's been applied. And what we said is, well, that's, again, too complex. You need supervision. How do we build that into an analog manual device that doesn't have digital? But what we did is we created a mechanism and then tested and validated the pressures across a variety of limb sizes across our whole size spectrum, so that we knew the range that you would be within as a pressure every single time. So although we can't tell you that we are specifically X percentage of pressure, we can tell you that we're in a specific range and you will not fall outside of that. And let's say it's a 10% swing. Let's say the range is of 10%. That means now that we always know it's definitely safe because it's always subocclusive, which doesn't close the artery. We allow some blood flow into the limb. And we always know it's effective because it's in an effective range because we've built it that way. So we've removed the faff. You don't need wires, apps, digital components. You simply need the product, the table that tells you the pressure, which you can learn off by heart in 2 seconds. And then you can just administer BFR on your own without supervision. And what that does is it unlocks BFR for widespread use. Now it's a device that can be used at home. It can be used while traveling on a plane, in swimming pools, in saunas, wherever you want to leverage BFR, you can because of our product. Before it was very much a rehab device. So essentially opened the aperture and now allows everyone to use it.
Well, there's 2 things that immediately spring to mind there as I'm listening to you. One is when you say monitoring closing the artery. And I'm thinking, that sounds quite technical for just a layman like me. But then the other side of that is we've already spoken about over 200 organisations around the world that clearly are buying into what you're doing and the wearables you're supplying. So if I come to you or the sports organisation I represent at a weekend comes to you and says, okay, we're interested, what do they see? What are the products that are going to be on offer to them? Because clearly it's going to be something that takes the technical side out of it, the specialist side out of it, out of the equation, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, it depends on the degree of education there that pre-exists. So in the professional sports setting, 99% of teams will use BFR already for rehab. So they will be aware of the principles and the physiology of BFR and how to use it. We've just redeveloped and redefined how it's used. So what we offer is twofold, really. We offer education. So it's not just product. We educate on performance BFR is what we term it. So there's rehab BFR and performance BFR, which is the bigger side of the continuum. So we educate on how to use it in these unique and novel ways, show them the literature and the research, and show them insights from NFL teams that we work with, NBA teams, MLS, Premier League teams, specific for their needs and their use case. Of course, some sports don't have translation from these 2 sports, so we'll pick the sport that makes sense. But we'd offer a consultation of sorts, so a discovery call to understand their needs, their wants, and how we can solve challenges for them with the product, and then onboard them. We make sure we very much work closely with the coach and with the athletes. We're not just, here's the product, go away and use it. We very much work together and collaborate on using BFR so that everyone understands the best, most practical ways to apply it to get what they need from it.
And is it something as simple as a strap, or is it clothing? How does it come?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah. It's a t-shirt or a pair of shorts with an integrated mechanism. So a patented mechanism we've called Hematech, and it's within. If you can see the video, it's within the sleeve where you would pull the strap around the arm, apply the pressure, and fix to a Velcro fixing point. That would be a pressure point. We have a table for the pressure. So if you go to setting 1, you're applying X amount of pressure. Setting 2, Y amount of pressure. Same for the shorts. It's a strapping mechanism built into the housing that you reach under your leg, pull the strap very tight around the leg and apply to a pressure setting. And again, it looks super simple. It is super simple, but the science and the research that went into making it super simple was very intense and laborious. So that's the beauty of it. We very much bridge science and practice. We are the middle bit. We say, this is really nice, lovely science, but it's very difficult to understand and apply. This is where we need to use it in the practical world, the ecologically valid setting. Let's build a product that solves that and bridges that gap. And that's very much how we've set up as a business. We are that bridge between science and practice. Not only because that's my background, I was a practitioner and an academic, but the staff we have on board, both sides of the spectrum, and can coordinate between to bridge that gap.
And we've mentioned on several occasions that this training method can be used in rehabilitation as well. Now, as any athlete will know, if you're coming back from a ligament, muscle injury, quite often there's intensity training involved, which puts strain on joints as well. This is where BFR comes into its own, isn't it?
Absolutely. So traditionally, BFR is used for return to play for rehabs. As I mentioned, that's how I used it in my practice in pro teams. And while that's incredibly effective, there's a big green tick on that. What I would like, if you'll permit me to focus on, is the more performance element here. So as a business, we do service rehabs, of course we do, but we do like to work alongside the existing BFR technologies who deliver rehab BFR very, very effectively on a one-on-one medical supervised setting. Where we sit is for whole squads of athletes. And that will be unlocking things like recovery for whole squads, training for whole squads, warming up. So applying BFR during your movement, mobility, stretching flows will enhance performance on the pitch, on the court, in the swimming pool. And that's very much where we sit. So I don't want to divert from the question because BFR is incredible for rehab. That's where it started. But the whole point in Hytro is we've unlocked this massive, massive continuum of performance that we can now achieve through BFR.
Okay, well, that leads us perfectly on to something we touched upon right at the very start of this conversation, Warren. You've now completed 2 studies with SpaceX, and people like me might look at that and say, well, how does that link into sports and pro athletes and performance? I'll allow you to explain all.
Sure. Yeah, I guess that was certainly one of the biggest pinch me moments. Effectively, the cliff notes are a phone call from a NASA engineer. He's the head of human works. And he said we'd solved the problem for space travel. And I was like, that's interesting. Never thought about this before. And essentially, in space, zero gravity, there is a big issue with atrophy. So muscle tissue losses, bone mineral density losses, etc. You see it sometimes in the news where the astronauts come back, they can't walk, they're in a wheelchair coming out of the capsule, just because they've degraded, essentially. So they've known about the benefits of blood flow restriction for offsetting those issues for decades. However, crucially, there was no device that was safe enough to go to space, because with the more expensive digital app-based products, if there's a spark from electricity, obviously in a vacuum, in a chamber, that's not good news. So they could never send an electronic device. On the flip side, people used to wrap tourniquets around their arms and legs, simply resistance bands and whatnot. But the problem there is it's very unsafe because you don't have a clue what pressure you're applying to the limb. It's not standardized. It's just very unsafe. So the fact we married the two, we made a tourniquet-based system, but it's very scientifically validated, removed all the electricity and digital components. We were the first device and only device that was allowed to go to space and got validated for space travel. So we've now been a part of 2 missions, the Polaris Dawn last year, which was the first commercial spacewalk ever done, which was incredible to watch, and then Fram 2 this year, which was the first mission to fly over the poles of the Earth. And essentially, they've been testing the safety and efficacy of the product with the future intention to build it into the spacesuits, because we own the patents for integration into garments, and spacesuits are classed as a garment. So we own the patent for that integration, which means we're now validating, testing, and building it into the future spacesuits to, touch wood, be a part of the mission to the moon and to Mars, which is the intention of the space agencies. So yeah, very, very much a pinch me moment. And the translation to sport, it's been done in sports for this purpose for decades. So actually, it's the translation the other way, to be honest. It's been used to offset atrophy in athletes for decades, and then it's been used to help them return to play for decades. So we're taking the same principles in science and launching it to space, essentially.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And as you say, I imagine absolutely a pinch me moment when you find yourself speaking to officials at NASA and collaborating with them. I wonder, across all your work with BFR, quite often in different areas, you'll come across myths, misconceptions that need debunking. Is that the case here as well?
Sure. I mean, as you mentioned, with a little bit of a, I guess, for want of a better word, lack of knowledge in BFR, it sounds scary, right? It sounds restricting blood flow. That doesn't sound safe. I can assure you it is absolutely safe. And as I said, there's 13,000 plus research papers proving it's as such. But of course, there are contraindications like anything. So If you had a blood clot, for example, you would not exercise because you can move a blood clot. It's the exact same principle for BFR. However, there's a misconception that BFR causes blood clots because it sounds like we're restricting blood flow. Absolutely not. In fact, quite the contrary. It helps improve blood vessel function and helps blood flow through the vessels, almost cleaning them when it flushes. So it's actually an incredibly positive thing to do with things like hypertension, with things of blood vessel kind of non-significant issue nature with blood vessels. Now, caveat, I am not a medical doctor. My doctorate was in sports science, so I'm not giving any medical advice here. If you have a contraindication, please check with your GP. But yeah, that would be the biggest misconception with BFR. Essentially, it is very safe and it's robustly proven to be safe for non-contraindicated people.
It sounds, though, on the surface at least, that there is the potential for this method to be used in other areas, other walks of life, maybe beyond sport as well. But working your particular sphere, I imagine you have ideas about what might be around the corner. So what are we looking at going forward?
Sure, great question. So, as you mentioned before, we work extensively with professional sports, several hundred teams and many thousands of top flight athletes. But really, the growth of this business, while that's the incredibly fun stuff, and that's where my background has been, it's going to be the consumer athlete, right? So it's going to be the grassroots, the semi-pro, the bigger piece of the pie, the people who want more from their performance, right? So your cyclists, your triathletes, your runners, your hybrid athletes, and after those demographics, your kind of grassroots footballers, etc. After that, we have big intentions to help support the medical world. So BFR's from a rehab medical background. We have the only safe to use autonomously device, so you can use it at home. So therefore, in the future, we're aiming to have this as something as a prescription. So if you have a knee, hip replacement, for example, or an ACL reconstruction, or any kind of tissue wasting injury, for example, this should be something that's prescribed because it will definitely help those individuals. So we have very big aspirations to move through those verticals carefully. We can't jump on everything at once, but pro athletes is where we've started. We now tell the stories, unlock consumer athletes, and then we're going to work on the medical aspect and help as many people as we possibly can that are in a situation where BFR could help.
Well, look, it seems to me that this has been an incredible journey in the space of just 5 years. And the next 5 years, if this conversation is anything to go by, are a period to keenly watch as well. We'd love to have you back on the show again for an update going forward and to find out what the latest developments are as well, if that's possible. For our listeners and viewers on the YouTube channel, where can they stay across all the information and latest updates from you?
Sure. So, I mean, for any sports team coaches that are listening right now, I would highly encourage you to book in a consultation or discovery call to understand how we can support you in your specific setting. We're very much in the business of working together and collaborating. So head to the website, head to the Pro Sports page, and just drop your email and say you're interested in a discovery call. Please also take a look at our LinkedIn, particularly my own LinkedIn. I keep up to date with all the cool stuff like space travel, when I have meals with NFL players, things like that. All the cool stuff's on my page. So head to Dr. Warren Bradley on LinkedIn and Warren Hytro on Instagram. But of course, please do head to the Hytro social pages too. It's just at Hytro on Instagram and LinkedIn. And yeah, well, thank you so much for your time as well, Richard. I appreciate you having us on today.
No, it's been fantastic. And like I say, we started this conversation with me being very naive about BFR training. So I feel like I've learned some more, and certainly going forward, it's something I'll keep a keen eye on as well. We wish you all the best, Warren.
Thank you very much, sir.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Huge thanks to Dr. Warren Bradley for joining me on this edition of the Science for Sport podcast. And if you found what he had to say interesting and want to find out more, then you can do so by visiting our website, www.scienceforsport.com. And if you've enjoyed this particular edition of the podcast, please do feel free to share it with a coach, a colleague, an athlete or a friend. As I always point out at this juncture, the more downloads we can get, the easier it becomes for us to attract top-name athletes or experts such as Dr. Bradley at the cutting edge of their field. Well, that is just about all for this edition. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to the next time we get together on the Science for Sport podcast.
Subscribe to the Science for Sport podcast now, wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more insights, resources, and to join the Academy, visit scienceforsport.com and connect with us on social media by searching for @ScienceForSport. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.